Nobody talks about this night the way they should, because if they did, it would completely change how Derrick Rose's story is told. Before the injuries, before the doubts, before the what-ifs, there was fear. Real fear. Not his fear, but the league's fear of what they might have accidentally unleashed. Because on this night, a 20-year-old rookie walked into the playoffs against the defending champions, against grown men who had already won everything, and he did something that still doesn't sound real today. And here's the part most people don't know. Half the arena expected him to fail. Half the league expected him to be overwhelmed, and even some people inside the Bulls organization quietly wondered if this moment was too big. What happened next is why Derrick Rose was never just another young star, and if you think you already know this story, stay with it, because there's a side of this game that almost never gets mentioned, and it changes everything. Before the opening tip, the narrative was already written. The Boston Celtics weren't just champions, they were a warning. Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, veterans who had survived wars, players who knew how to suffocate young talent before it could breathe. This wasn't just a playoff series, it was a test designed to expose rookies. History said Derrick Rose wasn't supposed to survive it. History said he was supposed to learn, to struggle, to take his lumps and come back later. And that's exactly why what happened that night hits so differently. Because from the first possession, it was clear Rose wasn't here to learn. He was here to take something. You could see it in his body language. No panic, no hesitation, no wide-eyed rookie nerves. The moment he crossed half court, the speed was different. Not reckless, not rushed, just faster than the game expected. Rajon Rondo picked him up early, confident, almost smiling like he'd seen this story before. Veteran point guards always do. They let the kid make his first mistake. But Rose didn't give him one. He attacked gaps that didn't look open, slipped passes through angles that shouldn't exist, and finished at the rim like contact was an inconvenience, not a threat. And that's when the noise in the building changed. Not louder, sharper, because Boston realized this wasn't a normal rookie moment. The first quarter alone felt wrong, like the script had been flipped. Rose wasn't deferring, wasn't playing safe, wasn't hiding behind plays. He was running the offense like it already belonged to him. Mid-range pull-ups, explosive drives, assists delivered right on time, not early, not late. Every time Boston adjusted, Rose adjusted back, almost instantly. This wasn't athletic chaos, this was control, and the Celtics hated that more than anything. You can overpower a young player. You can intimidate him, but you can't do much when he's calm. By halftime, the numbers already didn't make sense. Points piling up, assists stacking quietly, and still no celebration, no flexing, no emotion wasted. Just that same expression, like he expected this all along. That's the part that made veterans uncomfortable, because rookies aren't supposed to look like this in their first playoff game. They're supposed to feel the weight. Rose didn't. If anything, he looked lighter, freer, like the pressure had been lifted instead of added. And Boston knew, deep down, that this wasn't a fluke quarter or a lucky stretch. This was something they were going to have to survive for the rest of the night. Then came the third quarter, the stretch where playoff games usually reveal the truth. This is where young players fade, where adrenaline runs out, where mistakes multiply. Instead, Rose escalated. Faster first step, stronger finishes, smarter reads. Every possession became a choice for Boston. Stay home and let him score, or help and let him carve you apart. Either way, he was winning. And every time the Celtics made a small run, Rose answered immediately. Not with noise, but with precision. A drive through contact, a kick out for a three, a hesitation dribble that froze a defender just long enough. It wasn't dominance in the loud way people expect. It was dominance through inevitability. By the fourth quarter, something rare happened. The Celtics stopped talking. No trash, no gestures, no extra shoves. Just focus. Because now it wasn't about teaching a rookie a lesson. It was about stopping a problem. And the crowd could feel it. Chicago fans weren't just cheering, they were realizing that this kid wasn't building towards something. He had already arrived. 30 points came and went. 10 assists followed, and still the game stayed close. Not because Rose slowed down, but because Boston refused to break. Champions don't fold easily.
And that's what made this performance even heavier. Rose wasn't doing this in a blowout. He was doing it while being hunted. The final minutes told the real story. Ball in Rose's hands, seasoned defenders shading him, traps forming, bodies collapsing into the paint, and still he made the right decision every time. Not flashy, not forced, just right. When the game went to overtime, something clicked in the arena. People weren't asking if Rose could handle the moment anymore. They were asking how far he could push it, because 36 points and 11 assists in a rookie playoff debut against the defending champions wasn't just impressive, it was historic. No Bull had ever done it. Very few rookies in league history had even come close. But here's what makes this night different from the highlight reels. After the game, there was no celebration tour, no welcome to the league speeches. Veterans didn't pat him on the back. Coaches didn't hype him up. There was a quiet understanding instead. Derrick Rose had just skipped steps, and when you skip steps in the NBA, it changes expectations permanently. From that night on, he was no longer a promising young guard. He was a standard, and standards come with pressure. That game announced him to the world, but it also locked him into something heavier, because when you show that level of control, that level of fearlessness, people don't wait for you anymore. They demand it every night, and that's the hidden cost of that debut. The league didn't just see a star being born, they saw a future they couldn't slow down. And for Derrick Rose, that night was both a beginning and a burden, even if no one said it out loud yet. And here's the real question you need to think about and answer honestly in the comments. If a rookie can dominate champions like that on his first playoff night, does that mean he was destined for greatness? Or does it mean the league never gave him permission to grow at his own pace?
The thing about that night in Boston is that the numbers became the headline, but the reactions told the real story. Inside the Celtics locker room, there wasn't laughter, there wasn't relief, there wasn't even frustration in the usual sense. There was respect mixed with something sharper, a kind of irritation that only appears when veterans realize a line has been crossed earlier than expected. Kevin Garnett didn't talk much after the game. Paul Pierce gave short answers. Rajon Rondo, usually eager to dissect matchups, avoided specifics. Because how do you explain a rookie not just keeping up, but controlling stretches of a playoff game against the defending champions? And this is where Derrick Rose's debut quietly separated itself from every great rookie performance before it. Most rookies explode because the defense underestimates them. Boston didn't underestimate him for long. By the second half, they were throwing real playoff coverages at him. Hard hedges, late switches, physical bumps off the ball, little tricks veterans use to see if a young player's confidence cracks when the game slows down. Rose didn't crack, he adapted. That's the part that doesn't show up in highlights. Athleticism can get you past a defender once or twice. Adaptation is what keeps you alive in the playoffs. Every adjustment Boston made came with a risk. When they pressed him higher, he used his body better, shielding the ball and forcing help. When they sagged off, he took the shot without hesitation. When they trapped, he trusted his teammates instantly. That trust is rare in rookies. Most young stars want the moment to be theirs alone. Rose wanted the win, and that mindset mattered, because even though Chicago lost that game in overtime, something irreversible had already happened. The Bulls hadn't just competed, they had been led. You have to remember what Chicago was at that point. Post-Jordan, post-dynasty, still searching for an identity that felt real. They had talent, but they didn't have a voice. That night, the voice emerged. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady. Teammates followed Rose without discussion. Veterans deferred to him naturally. Coaches let him read the floor. That doesn't happen by design. It happens when a player proves in real time that he sees the game a step ahead. And that's when the expectations quietly shifted. Not publicly, not in headlines, but internally. Chicago stopped treating Derrick Rose like a rookie almost overnight. More responsibility, more minutes, more pressure, more trust. And with that came something dangerous, inevitability. When a fan base sees a player perform like that so early, they don't ask if anymore. They ask when. When will he win?
When will he dominate a series? When will he carry us? Those questions don't wait for development. They demand answers immediately. The rest of that series only reinforced it. Game after game, Rose attacked Boston with the same calm aggression. Even when the Celtics adjusted, even when the physicality ramped up, even when fatigue should have shown, he kept coming. Not reckless drives, not forced shots, controlled chaos. And slowly, subtly, something changed in how the Celtics defended him. They respected his first move, then his counter, then his patience. That's a brutal realization for champions, because once a young player earns your respect in the playoffs, you know he's going to be a problem for years. What's rarely mentioned is how much energy that kind of respect demands. Rose wasn't just playing against Boston's defense, he was playing against their experience, their timing, their psychological pressure. Every possession required precision, every mistake would be punished. And yet, he didn't simplify his game to survive, he expanded it. That's why the performance didn't feel like a hot night, it felt like a preview, a warning. Around the league, front offices noticed, scouts noticed, players noticed. You could see it in how guards started picking him up earlier the next season, how help defense arrived quicker, how game plans mentioned his name first. That playoff debut became reference material. Film rooms replayed it, not for highlights, but for tendencies. And when a rookie becomes a subject of serious film study, it means he's already altered the competitive landscape. But here's the part that often gets lost when people romanticize that game. Derrick Rose didn't celebrate it as a breakthrough. He treated it like a standard. And standards are dangerous, because once you set them, everything else is measured against them. When he scored 20 later, it felt quiet. When he struggled, it felt alarming. The margin for grace disappeared early. And that pressure didn't come from fans alone. It came from the memory of what he had already proven he could do. That night didn't just announce him as a star. It told the league he wouldn't wait his turn. And the league responded the only way it knows, by pushing back harder. More contact, more minutes, more responsibility, less patience. And Derrick Rose accepted all of it without complaint, because from that first playoff night on, he wasn't chasing potential anymore. He was defending a reputation he had created almost instantly. And that raises another uncomfortable question you don't hear often enough. When a player peaks early in the eyes of the world, does the league give him room to evolve, or does it demand that he stays perfect just to justify the belief it placed on him?
The pressure didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, disguised as praise. Every time Rose touched the ball after that series, there was an expectation attached to it. Not from commentators yelling on TV, but from defenders who stopped giving him space, from coaches who stopped calling safe sets, from teammates who instinctively looked at him when things got tight. That's when you learn what that Boston series really did. It didn't just raise his profile, it rewired how everyone interacted with him on the court. Chicago started the next season with a different kind of attention. Arenas felt louder when Rose drove. Bench reactions felt sharper. Opponents weren't surprised anymore. They were prepared. And preparation is respect's most honest form. Guards studied his angles. Big men timed their help better. Teams dared him to shoot, then punished him for taking the lane, then punished him again when he passed. That's the cycle every true star enters, and Rose entered it faster than almost anyone in modern NBA history. What makes this part of the story uncomfortable is how natural he made it look. There was no visible frustration, no dramatic gestures, no public complaint about treatment or whistles. He absorbed the contact and kept moving forward. And because he didn't complain, people assumed he was fine. That assumption followed him for years, because when you don't show pain, the league rarely stops to ask if you're accumulating it. The Celtics series became a measuring stick inside Rose's own career. Analysts would say things like, "Remember what he did as a rookie?" every time he faced adversity. Fans would say, "We've seen him dominate champions before," when expectations rose. And that comparison, fair or not, narrowed the way people evaluated him. Growth stopped being the goal. Replication became the demand. Be that guy again. Be that explosive. Be that fearless. Be that unstoppable. But playoff basketball isn't static.
Bodies change, defenses evolve, roles expand, and Rose's role expanded rapidly. He wasn't just scoring anymore, he was organizing, directing traffic, taking responsibility for momentum shifts. When Chicago needed a run, they didn't look to a system, they looked to him, and that responsibility compounds. Every possession carries more weight, every landing carries more risk, every drive becomes a test of durability. What's rarely acknowledged is that Rose's style wasn't reckless, it was expressive. He played the game the way it made sense to him, attacking gaps, using speed as rhythm, not chaos. But rhythm-based athleticism depends on trust in your body, and the league tested that trust relentlessly. If you show you can survive contact, they give you more. If you keep surviving, they stop protecting you. That's not written anywhere, but every star feels it. The memory of that Celtics series also shaped how opponents approached psychological warfare. Trash talk wasn't about intimidating him anymore, it was about reminding him, "You did this before, right? You're supposed to be that guy." Subtle comments, nothing public, nothing reportable, just reminders that the standard existed because he created it. And once a standard exists, doubt doesn't need to be spoken loudly, it only needs to be implied. And still, Rose kept responding, not always with 36 points, not always with highlight plays, but with control, with composure, with leadership that didn't demand attention. He became the center of Chicago's basketball gravity. The city felt it, fans trusted it, teammates leaned into it. And that's when the story took its most fragile turn. Because when a franchise's identity forms around one player so completely, everything rises or falls with him. That first playoff debut didn't just tell people who Derrick Rose was, it told them who he was expected to be forever. And expectations don't age with players, they freeze them in time. They replay moments instead of understanding processes. They reward repetition, not adaptation. And Rose, without ever saying it out loud, carried that weight with him into every season that followed. So when later moments in his career are discussed, moments of hesitation, moments of adjustment, moments of physical change, they're often framed as departures from greatness. But the truth is, they were responses to a level of greatness he was forced into unusually early. Most players earn space to grow. Rose earned pressure instead, and pressure doesn't always break you immediately. Sometimes it reshapes the path entirely. The real question, the one that lingers beneath the highlights and the nostalgia, is whether that Celtics series was a gift or a burden. Did it free him, or did it lock him into an image that no evolving body could sustain forever? And if the league had waited, if expectations had risen slower, would the story feel different today? That's not something a box score can answer, but it's something every fan feels when they watch that footage again, knowing what came next, knowing how rare that moment was, and knowing how quickly the world decided who Derrick Rose had to be from that night on.
That night in Boston still plays differently when you watch it now. Not because the moves look outdated, not because the speed feels slower, but because you know what the league did with that moment afterward. You know how quickly it turned belief into demand. You know how fast admiration turned into expectation. And that's what makes the memory heavier instead of lighter. Derrick Rose never ran from that game. He never downplayed it publicly, never framed it as luck or adrenaline. But he also never used it as a shield. He didn't say, "I've already proven myself." He kept showing up as if nothing had been settled, and that quiet mindset became part of why people misunderstood him, because in a league that celebrates loud confidence, his calm felt like absence. But it wasn't absence, it was discipline. As the seasons moved forward, commentators would replay that playoff debut whenever Chicago faced a big moment. Remember what Rose did to Boston as a rookie? The phrase became a shortcut, a way to compress his entire identity into one night. And shortcuts are dangerous. They erase context. They ignore cost. They pretend greatness is a fixed state instead of a moving target. The truth is, that game forced Derrick Rose to grow up fast in basketball years, mentally, emotionally, competitively. There was no learning curve after that. Every mistake felt magnified. Every struggle felt like regression. And when the league watches you through that lens, patience disappears. Fans don't ask what you're becoming, they ask why you're not already there. Yet inside that pressure, Rose kept redefining leadership. He didn't dominate by volume alone, he dominated by control.
He read defenses earlier. He trusted teammates in moments where stars often don't. He accepted blame when things went wrong, even when they weren't his fault. And slowly, almost invisibly, he became something more complex than the explosive rookie people remembered. He became the anchor of a franchise that desperately wanted stability. But anchors carry weight, and the deeper they hold, the more strain they endure. That first playoff series taught the league how much Rose should carry, so they kept adding more responsibility, more minutes, more physicality, more reliance. And through it all, he rarely showed frustration, which only convinced people he could take more. When people talk about Derrick Rose today, they often jump ahead. They talk about injuries, they talk about what changed, but they rarely pause long enough on what was established first. That Boston series wasn't just an introduction, it was a contract, an unspoken agreement between player and league. You show us this level, and we will hold you to it forever. And maybe that's the most important part of the story. Not the 36 points, not the 11 assists, not even the overtime loss, but the fact that in his very first playoff game, Derrick Rose showed the NBA exactly how dangerous belief could be when it arrives too early and too strong. Because belief doesn't just lift players, it reshapes the paths they're allowed to take. And from that night on, Derrick Rose's path narrowed. The room to stumble disappeared. The room to adjust shrank. Everything became urgent, immediate, now. That's why that game still matters, not just as a highlight, but as a turning point. The moment a rookie stopped being protected by youth and started being judged by legacy. The moment Chicago found its leader, and the moment the league quietly decided it would never look at Derrick Rose the same way again. So when you watch that footage now, watch beyond the speed, watch beyond the fearlessness, watch the reactions, watch the respect form in real time, watch the expectations take shape, because that's where the real story lives. And maybe the real question isn't whether Derrick Rose announced himself that night. He did. The question is whether the league was ready for what it asked of him afterward. That's something worth debating, and if you were watching back then, or even if you weren't, drop your take in the comments. Did that playoff debut elevate Derrick Rose, or did it burden him too early?